Picture this scenario. Two men are competing for the attention of one woman. The first is always available, responds immediately to her messages, agrees with everything she says, and constantly displays his adoration. The second is unpredictable, has his own plans, sometimes disappears for days without explanation and never seems particularly impressed by her efforts to impress him. Which one will ignite stronger passion? If your experience suggests the answer, you've already touched upon one of the most paradoxical truths about human nature. We desire most intensely what we cannot fully control. This truth isn't a random discovery of modern psychology. As far back as the 16th century, Italian political philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli formulated it with brutal clarity in his observations on power and human nature. "It is better to be feared than loved," Machiavelli wrote in his famous treatise, The Prince. While this maxim was intended for political rulers, it reveals a profound psychological truth that extends far beyond palaces and throne rooms, into the most intimate spheres of human relationships. Why does predictability kill passion while unpredictability fuels it? Why do men who try hardest to please often end up loneliest? And how can Machiavellian wisdom about power help us understand these enigmatic dynamics of attraction? To understand this paradox, we must first dig into the fundamentals of how human desire functions. Machiavelli, despite writing more than 500 years ago, understood something fundamental about human nature, that modern psychology is only now beginning to confirm with scientific research. In economics, there exists a basic principle. What is rare has higher value than what is abundant. Diamonds are expensive not because they're more useful than water, but because they're rarer. The same principle operates in the realm of human relationships, but in ways we rarely fully recognize. When a man is always available, when he responds immediately to every call, when he constantly seeks approval and attention, he unconsciously signals low value in the relationship marketplace. Not because he's less valuable as a person, but because his behavior suggests he has no other options, no other interests, no other priorities besides this particular woman. Machiavelli observed the same phenomenon among the political leaders of his time. Princes who too easily granted audiences, who tried to please everyone, who showed desperate need for approval, they lost the respect of their subjects. Conversely, rulers who maintained certain distance, who were selective with their favors, who created the sense that access to them was a privilege, they inspired both reverence and desire. German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, writing centuries after Machiavelli, developed a theory about the dynamic between master and slave that illuminates our topic. According to Hegel, at the foundation of human relationships lies a struggle for recognition. Everyone wants to be acknowledged as valuable, important, worthy of respect. In the context of romantic relationships, this struggle for recognition creates an interesting dynamic. The man who behaves like a servant, who constantly tries to please, who places the woman's needs above his own, who submits to her every wish, he unconsciously takes a subordinate position in this dynamic. Machiavelli would call this a strategic error of the highest order. In politics, a leader who shows weakness inevitably loses his power. In love, a man who shows desperate need for approval inevitably loses his attractiveness. But be careful. This doesn't mean you should be cruel or dismissive in your relationships. The difference is subtle but critically important. It's about maintaining your own value and independence, not about humiliating the other person. To understand why these Machiavellian principles work so effectively, we need to look at the science behind human behavior. Modern neurology and psychology confirm what Machiavelli intuitively understood 500 years ago. Our brains have evolved to respond strongly to uncertainty and challenges. When the outcome of a situation is unclear, our nervous system activates in ways that enhance our focus and energy. Dopamine levels, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation, increase not when we receive the reward, but just before we receive it when the outcome is still uncertain. This explains why gambling is so addictive. It's not the winning that keeps people returning to the casino. It's the uncertainty, the possibility of winning, the adrenaline of the unknown. The same mechanism operates in romantic relationships. The man who is completely predictable, who always reacts the same way, who never surprises. He doesn't activate these powerful neurological systems. The woman's brain classifies him as familiar and safe, which in evolutionary terms means not particularly interesting. Conversely, the man who is slightly unpredictable, who is sometimes warm and accessible, sometimes distant and busy with his own affairs, who creates the sense that interacting with him carries an element of surprise. He keeps these arousal systems active in the brain. Evolutionary psychology teaches us that humans, both men and women, evolved as hunters. Hunting requires persistence, strategy, ability to track a moving target. These instincts still live within us, even in the modern world. In a romantic context, women often experience a hunting-like instinct toward men who represent a challenge, not because they're masochistic or enjoy suffering, but because challenge activates ancient neurological systems that make them feel alive and engaged. The man who is too easily catchable, who immediately surrenders without a fight, doesn't trigger these instincts. He's like prey that gives itself up to the hunter. It might be convenient, but it's not particularly exciting. Machiavelli understood this principle instinctively. He advised princes not to appear too accessible, not to distribute their favors too easily. People value more highly what they had to fight for, he observed. One of the most powerful psychological principles is social proof, our tendency to consider something more valuable if other people also value it. In the context of attraction, this creates an interesting dynamic. The man who has options, who is desired by other women, who doesn't appear desperate for attention, he signals high social value. Even a woman who initially might not have been particularly interested in him begins to wonder, if other women find him attractive, maybe I'm missing something. This isn't superficiality or vanity. It's a deeply embedded evaluation mechanism that helps us quickly determine the value of a potential partner in a complex social environment. If someone is popular among members of the opposite sex, it usually signals that they possess desirable qualities, even if we can't immediately identify them. Now that we understand the basic psychological mechanisms, we can explore why attempts at control so often backfire in romantic relationships. When a man shows signs of emotional dependency, when his mood depends entirely on the woman's reactions, when he cannot function normally without her constant attention, when he sacrifices his own interests and friendships for her, he unconsciously sends a message of emotional instability. From an evolutionary perspective, this is a warning signal. A partner who cannot take care of himself emotionally, who lacks his own inner stability, who needs constant validation, he will be a burden, not support in life's difficult moments. Machiavelli observed similar dynamics in political alliances. Leaders who showed desperate need for support, who begged for help instead of commanding or negotiating it, who became emotionally dependent on their allies, they lost respect and influence. One of the most powerful forces in human psychology is curiosity. We are programmed to want to understand puzzles, to fill gaps in information, to solve mysteries. This instinct, which helped our ancestors survive in a complex and unpredictable environment, is still strong within us. The man who reveals everything about himself right at the beginning, who has no layers to uncover, who is like an open book, he deprives the woman of the pleasure of discovery. There's no mystery to solve, no depths to explore, no surprises to anticipate. Conversely, the man who gradually reveals himself, who has a rich inner life, who shares but not everything at once, who maintains the sense that there's always more to learn about him. He keeps curiosity and interest alive. This doesn't mean being mysterious for mystery's sake or hiding important things in a relationship. It's about the natural unfolding of personality over time, saving some aspects of yourself for later, maintaining the sense that knowing you is a privilege, not a right. At the foundation of attraction lies admiration. We admire people who have qualities we value, but perhaps don't fully possess ourselves. One of the most attractive traits in a person is the ability to be autonomous, to have their own goals, passions, ambitions that exist independently of their romantic relationships. The man who has his own empire, whether career, hobbies, friends, projects, dreams, he radiates a kind of strength that is magnetically attractive. He doesn't need a woman to feel complete. He wants her, but doesn't depend on her. This difference is critically important. Machiavelli understood this principle perfectly. He advised princes to have their own resources, their own army, their own economic base. A leader who depends entirely on others' goodwill for his power is vulnerable and will eventually be replaced. In romantic relationships, the principle is the same. The man who has a rich and fulfilling life outside the relationship, who could be happy alone, who chooses to be with a woman because she adds value to his life, not because he needs her to feel whole, he is irresistibly attractive. To illustrate these principles more vividly, let's examine some of the most captivating male characters in history and literature. Remarkably, almost all of them possess the quality of being desirable precisely because they cannot be fully controlled. The legendary Don Juan is perhaps the most famous example of a man who attracts women precisely through his elusiveness. But what makes Don Juan so attractive? It's not simply his beauty or charm. There are many handsome and charming men who do not possess his magnetic appeal. The key to Don Juan's attractiveness lies in the fact that he can never be completely won. The moment a woman thinks she has captured him, he slips away. He's not cruel or indifferent. On the contrary, he's passionate and engaged in the moment. But there's always the sense that this moment is transient, that he will soon seek new challenges. This dynamic creates a sense of urgency in the women around him. They know their time with him is limited, that they cannot take him for granted. Paradoxically, this makes him more desirable, not less. Napoleon Bonaparte, despite his modest height and origins, attracted some of the most beautiful and intelligent women of his time. What made him so attractive? His insatiable ambition, his ability to pursue dreams that transcended personal interests. Napoleon was never a man who was satisfied with little. He always had bigger plans, higher goals, more grandiose visions. Even when he was in love, love was never the only thing in his life. He had an empire to build, wars to win, history to rewrite. This all-consuming ambition made him simultaneously accessible and inaccessible. The women in his life knew they had access to his heart, but they also knew they would never possess him entirely. There was always a part of him that belonged to his dreams and ambitions. In contemporary culture, the bad boy archetype continues to attract women for the same reasons Machiavelli observed centuries ago. It's not the badness itself that's attractive. It's the sense of unpredictability, independence, and impossibility of control. The bad boy doesn't follow society's rules unconditionally. He has his own moral code, his own priorities, his own vision of life. He doesn't try to impress everyone around him. He doesn't seek approval. These qualities, while sometimes leading to problematic behavior, signal strong, independent character. It's important to emphasize that the attractiveness doesn't come from destructive or harmful behavior, but from the qualities of independence and authenticity often associated with this archetype. Now that we understand the theory, how can we apply these principles in practice without becoming manipulative or dishonest? The key is understanding that the best application of these ideas comes from authentic character development, not from playing roles. True mystery isn't achieved by hiding information or playing at being mysterious. It's achieved by having a rich inner life, being constantly in the process of growth and development, having passions and interests that excite you regardless of your romantic relationships. The man who reads, who learns new things, who develops talents, who has hobbies, and interests outside work and his relationship. He will naturally have things to talk about, new perspectives to share, unexpected viewpoints to offer. His mystery will be authentic because he's truly developing as a person. Practical advice for maintaining healthy mystery includes not sharing everything at once in new relationships, keeping some aspects of your life personal, having friends and activities that are yours alone, and continuing to develop as a person, even after you're in a relationship. The Machiavellian principle of maintaining your own power translates in modern relationships to building a rich, fulfilling life that doesn't depend entirely on your romantic partner. This doesn't mean being selfish or neglectful toward your partner. It means being interesting, developing people with multiple sources of satisfaction and self-respect. Your empire might include your career, but not only that. It might include creative projects, athletic achievements, volunteer work, friendships, hobbies, travel, learning. The important thing is to have multiple things in your life that make you happy and fulfilled regardless of your romantic relationship status. When you have such a rich life, you naturally radiate confidence and independence. You don't desperately need your partner's approval because you receive satisfaction from many sources. This makes you more attractive, but also a better partner because you come to the relationship from a position of strength and fullness, not need and lack. One of the most important Machiavellian insights is that predictability leads to contempt, while controlled unpredictability maintains interest and respect. In the context of romantic relationships, this doesn't mean being capricious or unstable, but maintaining an element of variety and surprise in your behavior. Practically, this might mean sometimes being romantic and attentive, sometimes being focused on your own projects, sometimes initiating plans for shared activities, sometimes having your own commitments, sometimes being warm and open, sometimes being more reserved and introspective. The key is that these variations should be authentic, reflecting your true moods and needs, not performed for effect. When your behavior is rooted in genuine feelings and needs, it creates natural unpredictability that is magnetically attractive. While Machiavellian principles offer valuable insights into the nature of attraction, it's important to understand their limitations and potential dangers when misapplied. There's an important difference between maintaining healthy boundaries and being emotionally unavailable. Healthy boundaries mean knowing what your needs, values, and limits are and communicating them clearly and respectfully. Emotional unavailability, on the other hand, means avoiding intimacy and vulnerability out of fear or past trauma. A man with healthy boundaries will say no to things that don't align with his values or needs, but will be warm and accessible at appropriate times. He'll share his feelings honestly, but won't allow others to use or manipulate him. He'll be independent but not isolated. The emotionally unavailable man, conversely, will avoid deep conversations, will pull back when things become too intimate, will use distance as a defense mechanism. This might temporarily create attraction through mystery, but long-term it leads to unhealthy, unsatisfying relationships. The danger in applying these principles is that they can turn from authentic behavior into manipulative tactics. When you start consciously playing unavailability or independence in order to control another person's reactions, you cross the line into manipulation. True attractiveness comes from authentically developing qualities like independence, confidence, and a rich inner life. It cannot be faked long-term. If you try to play a role instead of developing your character, you will eventually be exposed and lose your partner's trust. Furthermore, if your goal is simply to attract a woman through these techniques without truly wanting to build a healthy, mutually beneficial relationship, you're using people for your selfish purposes. This is not only unethical, but ultimately self-destructive. One of the biggest challenges in applying these principles is how to maintain attractiveness while simultaneously building deep intimacy. Intimacy requires vulnerability, openness, interdependence, qualities that at first glance seem to contradict Machiavellian principles of independence and control. The solution to this paradox lies in understanding that true strength comes from the ability to choose when to be vulnerable, not from constant defensiveness. The man who can be strong and independent in one moment and warm and open in another, who can show vulnerability from a position of strength rather than weakness, he possesses the most attractive combination of qualities. In long-term relationships, maintaining attractiveness requires conscious effort from both parties. This includes continuing development as separate individuals, maintaining some level of unpredictability and surprise, and avoiding taking each other for granted. In concluding this extensive exploration of Machiavellian principles in romantic relationships, it's important to return to the fundamental idea. Attractiveness is closely linked to the perception of value, and value increases through scarcity and challenge. This doesn't mean we should be cruel, manipulative, or indifferent in our relationships. On the contrary, the most attractive people are those who combine warmth and accessibility with independence and self-respect. They are capable of loving deeply, but not desperately. They are willing to commit, but not to sacrifice themselves entirely. The ultimate Machiavellian lesson for modern relationships is this: focus on becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to control others because they have mastered themselves. Build a life so rich and fulfilling that you attract people not through manipulation or games, but through the genuine magnetism of authentic self-development. True power in relationships, as in politics, comes not from the ability to control others, but from the ability to control yourself. When you become the man you cannot control, driven by purpose, rich in character, independent in spirit yet capable of deep connection, you naturally become irresistible to others. The women who desire men they cannot control are not seeking domination or mistreatment. They are seeking strength, authenticity, and the thrilling challenge of earning the attention of someone who has options, someone who chooses to be with them, not out of need but out of genuine desire and appreciation. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest wisdom for modern men might be this: stop trying to be loved at any cost and start becoming worthy of love. Stop seeking to control the woman and start mastering yourself. The attraction that follows will be not just more intense, but more authentic, sustainable, and ultimately more satisfying for both parties. This is the eternal dance of power and desire, not a game of dominance and submission, but a recognition that we are most drawn to those who possess something we admire, something we cannot easily obtain, something that challenges us to become better versions of ourselves. In seeking to become uncontrollable, we paradoxically gain the power to form the deepest and most meaningful connections.